Rhydar's ready. Okay, we're speaking with Rhyddar. Let me update the text here so everybody knows who we're talking to. This will be me and Rhydar's first time speaking. I haven't ever spoken with Rhyddar before, and he's been subscribed close to a fucking year, which is absolutely wild. Ooh. Oh, it's not a command. There's no command for it. You just click your name. Jesse, you've been following since March 17th. Or March 27th, 2017. You created your account on March 17th, 2017. You had your account for 10 days. That's fucking wild, dude. That's absolutely crazy. Glamour Roadkill. I don't remember that. All right, we're talking with Rhyddar. Hey, Rhyddar, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, definitely can. Just mute stream.
There we go. We don't need to hear me twice.
But yeah, no, we did talk. It was, I think, one of my first streams, but it was fucking ages ago.
Must have been a long time.
Swearing, by the way.
Oh no, don't worry about it. We got the channel marked as mature, so don't fucking worry about it.
I mean, I'll try not to, but it's what I always. Oh boy, man, I got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get started.
I don't like talking about things which I don't know a lot of.
That's okay. I like doing that.
Yeah, I mean, what I really want to talk about, like the whole George Floyd protest and thing. Like,
okay.
I want to make sure that I know everything about it before I talk about it, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
So I'm not going to talk about that, you know? But I will say that I'm very sad that eventually one day I'm going to have to talk to my son about racism. And then have to talk to him about, you have to be careful about what, you know, people are saying and kind of what's their intent behind it. Because there is a lot of that going around with this case that's going on. But yeah, so I guess, I don't know, let's talk about my depression. Let's talk about that. That might help some people.
Right, I hate to cut you off here, but I think your threshold for Discord, I don't know if you're using push to talk or if you've got the like active speak on. Oh, okay. You're cutting out ever so slightly, like when you're talking. So give yourself like a half second or like a full second when you press so that I can hear you. Otherwise, it sounds like you're cutting out because of that.
Yeah, no, all good. I'll go to voice activity and then I'll just turn it off if there's like other sounds and stuff, because a lot of people walk in and out all the time because I'm living at home.
Oh, no worries, man. It's not a problem at all. I'd rather we continue the conversation and
yeah, I just didn't want, like, you know, like just the sound to just be like, oh, what the hell is that? And why?
No, I won't stop the conversation or ask or anything like that. If you set the expectation people walk around and you're at home, that's totally fine. I don't need to be like, hey, what does that sound? What are you doing? I'd rather we have the conversation.
You know? I don't want it to be annoying to your viewers, you know?
Oh, sure.
Like, honestly, for me, I don't really give a shit. Like, you know? Like, I don't care if you're annoyed by it. I just don't want all the other viewers.
I appreciate the concern, man.
It's all good. Also, sorry if I'm a little bit sick. Like, I got a little bit of a nasally sound, but I can't shake it off. It's been a month of me being sick. Like, I'd say kill me now, but oh boy, the conversation we're about to have.
Well, let's talk about it.
Let's feed into it right now. Like, the whole, I make a lot of jokes about wanting to kill myself.
Sure.
Now, to set the premise,
those are heavy jokes, by the way. So, like,
oh yes,
yeah,
oh yes, they are indeed heavy jokes. So, I have been suffering from anxiety and mainly depression since I was a teenager. Now, anxiety, I was actually diagnosed by a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, which is something a bit different. which I think I actually have to go to a psychiatrist to get officially diagnosed by it because it could be something else. But a lot of the other psychologists I have seen have said, yes, it is anxiety and depression, and that depression isn't as common as people think it is, and it's been overstated. And anyway, so
Okay.
I've never had an attempt to commit suicide, but I've had 3 instances where I've came very close to it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really weird, right? Like, because I see it as it, and I'm like, I don't really care. Like, some people, like, they really cage you about their feelings, and I'm just like, I do not care.
You
Like,
do not care in what way?
like, I don't really care what people think, because there's that sort of, how do you say it? When people are able to say things really easily about themselves, like really personal things, it can come off as this guy isn't telling the truth, because if this was really personal to him, it isn't the truth. But, you know, so that's what it can come across as. But for me, I can talk about like my anxiety, my depression, all that kind of lovely stuff so easily. But
Well, yeah, it sounds like
comes
it's
off as
something
weird.
you've been talking about it, right? So, and you're aware that it's a
Yeah.
real thing, and you're not like afraid to acknowledge that. So that's important.
Yeah, but I make a lot of jokes all the time about, oh yeah, man, I just want to kill myself. Like, I went up to the chemist. It was just like, oh, yeah, so what are you here for? Script for medication, but to be honest, if you prescribe me buckshot, it'd be 100% more effective. And
Okay.
it was like, she laughed her head off, and then she realized, oh wait, I should be laughing at it. And it's like, well, it's a joke.
I mean,
like,
it's a joke. Relax a little
But
bit.
yeah,
I'm trying
like,
to I'm trying to make light of this whole situation here.
sometimes people are just a bit like, oh, you know, you probably shouldn't be joking about that. And it's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be, but
Yeah, I mean the only thing that I would have a problem with is just because we're on stream, right? And so like,
yeah.
as somebody who's not an expert or a therapist, and we're just broadcasting, having a conversation, I would appreciate it if it was just like, you didn't do it, unless you're talking about it. I don't mind dark humor or anything like that, but like, this is more for my protection and anybody else who may be like too sensitive to like hear this shit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand, and sorry if I've made people uncomfortable.
Oh,
with
no,
what I've
no.
said.
I just, hey, don't preemptively apologize for anything. That's like one of the things that you've been around for a while, right? And so you know that when it comes down to conversation, nothing's off the table.
I mean it more or less like, you know, like some people can be genuinely offended by what I've said. And people got to understand the intent of what I'm saying is that I'm talking about it as if it is a joke.
Right.
It is something to make people laugh. It is to make light of something that is very dark. Now, some people can find that offensive, and, you know, like, they sort of understand that it's a joke, but it's not something that they kind of want to keep hearing all the time. Like, I have a friend who, like, because I joke about autism. I joke about the most darkest things. Like, I don't care.
Sure.
But to people who, like, it's kind of in joking. I don't go around saying it to everyone.
Right.
So in my group of boys, which is my friends, like, we'll joke about everything, but we all understand that we're joking about these things.
Right.
Now, I have a friend that, like, I won't talk about autism with her because it distresses her. So it's understandable. It's just, don't say this thing. Don't say things about things that people can be thinking. Like, it's just being considerate.
Right.
But some people may not know that. But because, like, you're on a stream, you're not with your boys, so you have to be a bit
hesitant,
sensitive.
Sensitive, bit. Yeah.
Like, you have to kind of, like, if you do slip up, you kind of have to show, like, your intent.
Sure.
Like, to say, this is what I mean by doing this. But if you interpret it another way, I'm sorry about it, and I'll try not to, like, even if, like, you know the intent and it's, like, offensive to you, like, I'll try not to do that again, kind of thing. But there's also a lot of people that will just, like, oh, you said, like, X, X, and X, I'm gonna make you, like, admit that you're sorry, but, you know, like, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like when it comes down to it, the hardest part about that sort of thing, like, you're talking about context, which is something that is really important when it comes down to comedy and like jokes and stuff. I don't know. It's streaming is in this weird space where, like, if this was a stream where I was a comedian and people knew that I was a comic, I could get away with quite a bit, but that still, you know, would, I don't know how to explain it, because of Twitch's involvement with like their terms and service. That's where things get muddy. So like you're talking about, you know, we're not with the boys, so we have to be careful about what we say. I completely agree with you there.
Yeah, like there's a time and place for being like making those kind of jokes, but
Sure.
if you're, for example, if everyone in your Twitch chat knew, like I have mature filtering, for example, and it's like, hey, sometimes I might stray off talking about these kind of things, like I put it in my bio somewhere, for example, then I guess it's sort of like, you know, like you kind of know what you're getting into, but yeah, it's a tough line for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but let's go back to the topic. So you wanted to talk about like anxiety and depression.
Oh yeah, we can talk about like what's kind of worked for me and what hasn't, I guess.
Okay.
Like that might help people. So,
yeah. Well, comedy is something that works for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it helps me feel less depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I'd say that, again, I come from Australia, so this actually means something when I say that our Medicare, like, it works as intended. The government has a lot of helpful programs for mental health. Our public health care works very well.
Rub it in.
So no. Well, I mean, that's another thing.
That's a joke for sure, but
yeah,
at the same time, there's
like,
truth in that.
like one of the big problems of America is you can't really just roll in public healthcare because it's not going to work.
Right.
It needs a lot of like time and a lot of like infrastructure. It needs a lot of like it would probably take about a decade to get it to work. But your country is just too big. It would cost way too much to get it to work. Like there are more problems in your country you need to figure out, and then on like a base level to like you figure those things out, and then you can work on this kind of thing. Not to all of a sudden turn this about America, but it's there's debates on it, and again I don't know way too much about it, so I don't want to have too much of an opinion on it. So it's
Sure.
Anyway. So, I have a lot of friends I can talk to about it, and that helped. Because I've lost a lot of my work that I did to anxiety. I just walked off the job, or I could not do my job because I would just get too anxiety about like job performance. I guess would be a good one. Our government healthcare, like the welfare, that's what you guys call it. Like they understand that I've got anxiety and depression, and like, hey, like, you know, we'll reduce like what you need to get done, so then you can like fit in your medical needs, like having to see a doctor and stuff. But what's not working, I think, is that it's kind of like something that it's not 100% kind of thought out, like, this is what we need to do, because every case is different. Now, I'm a very, oh boy, I probably shouldn't look at chat. I'm very, lazy person, so I need to be pushed a lot. And, like, if I'm not pushed to do things, I definitely won't do them. Like, I'm one of those, I'll get this thing done. This thing needs to be done, it will be done, but it'll be done at the last minute.
Procrastinator.
Deadlines are really helpful to me. Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, I feel that.
But sometimes I feel like people who are in really shit situations, that like anxiety and depression and stuff, they need a lot of people to be able to help them out, you know, to talk to them. But they need people to be able to push them. And this sort of like also comes into that talk you were having about with schools and like the maths being put into a lower grade maths. Yeah, because I was put into a lower maths as well when I wanted to do higher. because it was like, oh, hey, you're a good student, but I don't think you'll do the higher maths, but it's better to put you into the lower ones because it's just going to be easier for you. It's like you need to push. Like you don't. I'm losing my point. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, like it's. I feel like I need to be pushed harder to do things. Like I was good at school. Like I did a lot of got a lot of high marks, but my dad was a very high grading student. He's an immigrant as well from Wales, so they kind of have like a very a hard pushing thing because they didn't want dad to go into a low income job. They wanted dad to be the best that he could. But I kind of feel like there's a line between wanting to push your son to like do really well and then just being like straight up too hard on him.
Yeah.
Which I feel it does intersect a bit into the whole mental health, depression and anxiety, where it's like the government and the people who I work with in there are like, just like we can understand where you're coming from, like we'll make it easier for you. But it's like there's no inherent, hey, you need to get on top of these things because if you don't, you're just going to be like this forever.
Interesting.
And I've kind of been like this for about probably 8 years.
And you would say that you're not being challenged is what you're talking about, right?
I wouldn't go saying I'm not being challenged. Like, I'm just not being pushed into, hey, or having that sense of urgency, like, hey, like, you need to be able to do this, because I've signed up for, like, 4 courses, because I ultimately want to do a doctorate in education.
Sure.
No one in my family's ever done a doctorate. I want to be, like, the first one to do it.
Okay.
It's also, like, because you get to do, like, a PhD in... like you get to choose where you want to do your research, and I really want to do something in like trying to push kids into like what's the best way of people learning, for example, for like from primary school to secondary to tertiary, to like how to really engage with them, to get them critically thinking, to kind of like what the whole idea of school is. There are a few theories where, like, the best thing as a parent you can teach a kid for, like, before they go to school is being able to play by themselves and being able to play with other children.
Yeah, but you're talking about, like, socialization, primarily. Becoming socialized is just a natural part of, like, the the school system. I would say it's the primary reason that school exists, right? That's what I would say.
True.
I'm not an expert,
yeah,
but...
like, it builds into that. I'm not an expert on it either, to be 100%. To answer a question in the chat, I am 29 years old. It's a bit like having like a son and a daughter, and he's not my son, but I treat him as if he is a son because they all live together, and he doesn't have like it's like school does teach you to socialize, but it also teaches you other things like having a schedule, for example, having homework, a routine,
So you would say that, well, here, let's focus back on, I really want to get back into the whole, like, anxiety
I'm really
and depression.
sorry about just like going from one subject to another.
That's why I'm here, like, try to hone in on the conversation so I can help, because I'm the same way. If I'm having a conversation, I mean, you witnessed me talking to Jesse, and I'm like, what am I fucking talking about? But yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about the anxiety and depression stuff. So the depression thing, you've been talking about, like, would you consider depression a lack of motivation, or is that just like one of the symptoms of your depression?
As a teen, my depression was really not having like a romantic kind of like why can't I like get with someone?
Okay,
like a woman.
That's normal, yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing though. Like that's teenagers.
Yeah.
But to say that, like, I can't say that as I'm speaking for everyone kind of thing. It is sort of like you can't even say that's common. I had it, like, I went to one of my psychologists and I was like, oh yeah, but like, being depressed as a kid for not going to, seeing for wanting to see someone is common, or like depression's common. It's like, no, it's not.
Well, you would say depression, so depression, like there's varying degrees of depression, right? And when we're talking about depression, for what I'm thinking about it is, you're talking about like a hopelessness, right? A void that is within yourself that you can never fulfill. Like those are the feelings you're talking about, correct?
True. What I'm see, it's the thing. Like, from when I was a teen, it was different to what I was now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Why I'm feeling depressed.
Okay. So what's depression for you now?
Come into it. For me now, it's really like the fact that I can't, that because my oldest son is 5 years old, turning 6, and it's like I didn't have a proper relationship with my son because of the way my ex is.
Mm-hmm.
Where I got a surprise DVO once. That was great for 2 years. It was like, hell yeah. Didn't even do anything. It was what she said, and it comes down to the domestic court. So it's like, hey, can't, have fun with that. You are not going to win this one. And I was like, I mean, if she wants distance, I'll give her distance.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not someone who hates people. Hating, like, you can't hate people. Like, if something like randomly happens, you got to kind of think like, what's going on? Like, is, what's she trying to think here? Like, is she okay? Like, but yeah, like, I never really have like a maternal kind of relationship, but I do anything for my children, as it's kind of like a maternal thing as well. I don't have those kind of lovey-dovey feelings. I don't like cry. I haven't cried in like 12 years over anything.
How does that make you feel?
I guess it makes me feel like I'm not a human, but I don't know, like, I guess it's just, for me, it's just, I can make these emotional decisions, these like cold cut decisions without being like, well, this is the logic behind it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I would do it, kind of thing. And just not be torn by like, oh, well, like, this
but
is
how
just
does
a
that,
hard decision.
but when I say that, when I ask how does that make you feel? Like,
I mean,
what I'm referring to is like, this is a lot. So again, like, not an expert. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just taking you through the thought process of my own exploration, like my own personal experience. And these are the questions that I ask myself. Is like, Steve, why don't you cry? And I used to feel really bad about that. I was like, I feel like I'm not connected as a human being. I'm not connecting to myself emotionally. I'm not connecting to other people who feel emotion. My wife, who's a very emotional person, who wears her heart on her sleeve, like you heard. In comparison to me, like, she would, the ability for her to feel empathy and cry for another individual was like a jealous point for me, like, because of that. And I guess to share my personal story with detachment is because growing up, I also have a parent who is an immigrant. She's like, my family is Greek, right? And my mom's 100% Greek. Her parents moved from Greece to Illinois and raised 9 kids and hardworking family. And she tried to do the same thing with me. But what that involved was shutting off emotional stuff, because I was a man and I needed to take care of my sister. I needed to also deal with a lot of the verbal abuse that I was going through when I was younger. And so in order to protect myself and the people around me, I very rarely showed any emotion other than anger. And I think that's probably the easiest emotion for me, is anger. How do you feel about, like, out of all the emotions, do you have anger, or do you have like any emotion, or is it just a struggle to like get you to feel a certain way?
Yeah, I have anger, but I'm very careful about how I display my anger, because like, I'm a very logical minded person, if I can see the logic in something, then it's or rational, I guess.
Mm.
Uh,
And that's
see,
not necessarily
my
a bad
childhood
thing.
was really good. Yeah, it's not. Like, is it because I feel like I'm going to eventually like miss that empathy? Like, am I because I feel for people, you know, like I feel sorry for people. I care about people,
Mm-hmm.
but things don't make me cry that normally would, like losing someone.
Have you ever
The
lost
state
somebody
of
that was really
affairs.
close to you?
Yeah, I lost my grandmother and my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather, who were the immigrants of my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they moved from Wales because it was a shit time there, and they went all the way in through a boat to Australia, and they brought their immediate family, and they were really close. I cried at my mum's dad's funeral, who I barely knew, and then, well, this was as a kid, and then when my grandmother died, who we called Nana, I didn't shed a tear. I was a pallbearer along with her 3 sons.
Mm-hmm.
And then my grandfather died, and I didn't cry. Like I miss them, but I still didn't cry. Like I don't cry over things. I see something like happen, and I get over it immediately, and I'm just like, okay, that happened.
Mm.
Like, this is how I'm gonna deal with it, and I just go about my business.
And does
Like
that
when the deep
does that frustrate you that that's the case? Because you sound like you don't like that.
No, that doesn't frustrate me at all. This is the thing. Like, at some point,
Does
I'm
it bother
going
you?
to.
Is there any part of yourself that like you
It
feel?
does. It bothers me to the fact that I can just not care about something or have an emotional investment in it. That eventually something is going to happen, and I'm gonna just not care about it. But I should care about it.
Okay, so let's go back let's go back to what you just said. So that what you're talking about, like, I don't know, this is just me, again, not an expert. This is just like my own life experience. So for me, in a very similar vein, I learned at some point in my life that if I had shut off the emotional aspects of my sensitiveness, or what we'll just call it sensitiveness, if I could shut off my sensitivity, it protected me from feeling a certain way. Weak is the big one. So feeling weak, feeling like I don't have control over things, these were things that I had like struggled with and still struggle with to this day, more so back then than I do now. And I developed an emotional mechanism to shut that shit off whenever I wanted to. And a lot of it was like, and what you're talking about is like armor. The way you're talking about it, it sounds like you've created some sort of armor for yourself so that if things do go bad, it's like, well, you know, I anticipated this and I'm not that upset about it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
And so I'm curious, like, have you had like therapy sessions and anything like where you've been able to talk about, you know, exactly like the point where you found this armor? Are you currently working on like figuring out like what this is for you? Because as somebody, I mean, who spent a lot of his life protecting himself emotionally, I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad, but you clearly have developed like a sort of system to protect yourself emotionally, and getting in touch with your emotions is a vulnerable thing. Like, you have to take off the armor in order to experience something. And I know for me personally, when I was able to recognize that I had armor on and that I could take it off, I think that was probably one of the most freeing things like in my life, because I was able to like recognize that, well, I don't need to protect myself right now. There's no reason for that. I can remove this armor, I can put it back on, I can still use the armor, but I know how to take it off now. And that frustration of like not being able to quote unquote feel or be sad, you know, when I feel like I should be, is no longer like, I'm not questioning why I can't do it. It's just, I know why I can't do it and I can recognize it. So I'm curious, are you still going to therapy or anything like that? Are you still talking with any professionals?
It's been a while since I talked with a professional because of the whole COVID-19 thing and the fact
Oh,
that
true.
I'm heavily like procrastination, but I don't feel as if I have any problems talking about anything.
Right. Okay.
Like, yeah, anyone can ask me anything, and I'll tell you as long as it's appropriate, you know. Like, if some random goes up the street, it's a bit different. But I have no troubles talking to a psychologist about anything.
Right. Well, the only reason why I was asking is because like what you're describing is like, you know, you're describing it. I'm not gonna label it as a problem, but whoa, dude, the monster sounds. Welcome in everybody. But the way you're describing it is it's a like the ability to be emotionally vulnerable and not being that, like feeling like you're detached from being a human being. Like that's when people talk about that, it's usually not in a light sort of thing, like not in like I'm okay with this. It's usually like this is a problem and something that I'm like currently trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I take it lightly. I'm very weird with my words.
That's okay.
Is that there's been no event that's been like, hey, like you need to be able to like kind of use that armor or something, or been like, hey, like you need to not convey these emotions. It's just, I guess, how I've somehow along the way I've just all of a sudden, oh hey, like this has happened, and like this is just how I deal with it from now. Like there's been no traumatic thing.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be a traumatic thing. It's a learned thing. It's like a habit, you know. It's like learning something. Like, how do I protect myself? Well, I turn off that part of my brain that allows me to be emotionally vulnerable because it doesn't benefit me right now.
But yeah, I think protect is a weird word for it.
Whoa.
Because it's just like kind of taking all the emotion out of it, or taking all the emotion out of everything can kind of just make you see what's happening and like why it's happening and like how it's happening and you know what you should do.
While that's true, I feel like the understanding what your emotions are bring you closer to understanding who you are as a person.
Yeah, like I can understand like why I'm angry, like why this is happening. I don't see the point in getting angry over it or like kind of you know what I mean, like or like reacting to it in a certain way with emotions, because it's just it's pointless. It doesn't do anything. Like hating something, for example. Like I can hate my ex all I want, but that doesn't do anything. Like, yeah, like it'd be good to vent once in a while. Like that's good, gets it off your chest, but like it's just it has to be constructive, like what I do.
Why does it have to be constructive?
It's because there's this sort of like no point doing it. Like if there's no point in like how do I say it? I am just a complete mess. Oh boy.
That's okay.
Yeah. It's.
I'll try to help you. Just go ahead and focus on the question, and I'll see if I can help you explain it as you're going. Okay. Don't worry about like
sure thing.
What you say and like how you say it. Just try to get it out there so I can understand.
Yeah. Just blurt it out.
Yeah.
What do I mean by constructive? Like when I got the DVO, for example. There was things in it that were completely falsified and completely left out.
Say that one more time. When you got what?
When I got a DVO, which is a domestic violence order, there were allegations of rape in there, and it's like these things did not happen. There was consent. All of a sudden, there is no consent, and it's like there's no point going to her and confronting her about it because she wants space. That is what the DVO does. So, you know, it's like, well, if she wants space, she can have it. There's no point, like,
making up something,
confronting her about it, being like, these things are untrue, you know it, because she knows that already.
Sure.
And all it's going to do is bring conflict when what she wants out of this is to gain space. Okay. So you know, there's no point.
Well,
Like,
this is like what you're talking about is a specific scenario, like related to when this would be a good idea, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to explain what I mean by constructive.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Like what you're talking about is there's a purpose behind the way you're acting, right? So like,
yeah.
The answer I'm looking for, I guess, or what I'd expect you to explain is like that's a scenario where I think it would benefit you greatly to not engage and express yourself emotionally to somebody who's not willing to, listen to you, right? They're trying to use a third party to create space as opposed to being like, listen, I don't want to be with you and I don't want to be near you. Can you just like give me some space? You know what I mean? Like that's, you're talking about honesty, right? So I would expect that, you wouldn't pursue that, but I'm more talking about like on a personal level. Like, so there are times where you want to feel emotional, but you're saying that you can't, correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's weird. It's like, I don't feel angry.
Okay.
Like I feel angry, but I don't feel that angry. Like it's a very small amount of emotion.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Like, for example, I have a huge amount of anger for what's going on with the protests, but it's not enough to want to go out and do something stupid or to kind of like voice it out because it would be stupid to do that without having like enough research behind it to make points about it.
Sure, yeah. You could still express yourself like emotionally about it, right? As long as you're setting the proper expectation, like, hey, I don't really know what's going on in the world or how to handle it, but this is how I feel about it. It's all about setting those expectations. Otherwise, like, you're just another person who's not to point fingers or whatever, but in my scenario, like, I'm just another white person who thinks it's important that you hear what I have to say. When it's like, it's not about me right now. I'm just trying to raise money, like, for charity.
Yeah. And what I'm about to talk, what I probably was going to talk about would not be very good for, the charity in question, which is another reason why I don't want to talk about it, but I want to talk about it, but I probably shouldn't, kind of thing.
Okay. Well, do you want to talk about it? Because we can talk about it.
No, because I don't know enough about it. Like, on my points to make sure, because it's,
Sure.
Like,
okay.
Like, I can say what I'm angry about. Like, for example, people taking down statues, for example. Like, I'm very angry about that. Oh. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that. Or, I've forgotten. God damn. So this is why I want to write points, but yeah, I don't... It's like I want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it until I have points and stuff,
That's okay. I mean, we still have had a pretty productive conversation overall in terms of like your personal, sharing and stuff, but yeah. I mean, we could talk about the statues if you want, and I agree with Jesse. Like, they're statues of people who shouldn't be celebrated. As far as taking them down in the way that they're being taken down, I definitely understand the point of like, you should be petitioning so that they're removed and all that stuff, but when it comes down to the way everything's being handled, I think we can all agree this is like, I mean, Martin Luther King said, right? Riots are the language of people who have not been heard or who have not been given the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah. I don't 100% agree with that. I agree on it on a certain level, but they're not 100% like purely just because people were not heard. Because you have people who are opportunists. You have people like Antifa.
Sure.
So, like, yeah, like...
But Antifa isn't like a group. It's just, a bunch of people who designate themselves as that. It's not like I don't know. Yeah. Anti-fascists aren't like a... It's not like a full group of people.
No, but the group of people, Antifa, though, like there is an actual group of people called Antifa.
Well, that's what they call themselves, but it's not this. It's not actually Antifa. Like they call themselves that to like, I guess it's for confusion purposes. I think. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. Being an anti-fascist like isn't about being in a group. It's weird. Yeah, nobody should be pro fascism.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people have all of a sudden started saying, yeah, I'm Antifa, but it's like, that's because you think that you are that because you are anti-fascist. Like, pretty much everyone's anti-fascist, funnily enough.
Right.
Like, but there is an actual group called Antifa, and they are just thugs. They will just go around and do this really dumb stuff, like riots, for no reason, just because they're just anarchists, I guess.
Well, there's the difference between like rioting and looting, right? So like you're talking about, people taking advantage of chaos and fucking things up because they can.
Yeah, I really want to know more about these things before I comment on them, kind of thing. But I feel like the destruction of personal property, and then the whole people chanting Black Lives Matter over someone who was killed over police brutality, and the whole connotations of racism is a bit, like, it's
okay. Go ahead.
It's the American policing. I don't know, like, how it is over there. I know it's a thing.
Terrible.
I know racism's a thing.
It's real bad. I will say that. I mean, when it comes, I can't speak obviously as confidently about this stuff because I myself am just a white dude. I haven't really experienced racism in my life, and it very seldomly has been a part of anything that I've been a part of. I know that I'll have to deal with it for sure, like, because my wife is Asian and we're going to have, like, Asian kids. I'm going to have to deal with it at some point in my life, and I know that's going to be a thing for sure. But when it comes down to, like, racism in America, and like when people say that the like we were founded on racism, dude, when people say like America was built by immigrants, black slaves, Native Americans, like that's very real. And you're talking about people who've been oppressed literally their entire lives because of the color of their skin, something that they don't even get to choose. There's been a lot of fucked up things, specifically, I mean, all over the world for sure, but America has a long history of racism. And in terms of treating like human beings of different colors, people of color, black people, Native Americans, like I'm sure it's the same in Australia with Indigenous people, because I know I've read some articles and stuff there about that, but again, it's real bad. I mean, all of the destruction of property and all this stuff it's not about one dude who lost his life. We're talking about a long list of people. It was just we had the perfect mix of being stuck inside and that video coming out, which I don't know if you've watched, but it's horrific. I held off like viewing that video for, I want to say 3 days, because I knew that if I watched it, it would literally change my life, in terms of how I would be, because I don't search for people dying. You know what I mean? I don't look for that. It's not something that, like, I know that in the past, like, it was something that some of my friends saw online. They'd be like, dude, this guy gets his head cut off and shit. And I was like, what the fuck? Why are you guys watching that? There was no reason for it. It was just violence for violence, right? But when that video is heartbreaking. What you see is like a complete abuse of power, and it's something that happens on a regular basis, that is not documented and has not been able to be documented for years and years and years, because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have technology to do it. And so I think it was a perfect storm of, like, you know, this George Floyd dying, and us being stuck inside for COVID-19. We're at the highest unemployment rate we've ever had, with 3 months of people not receiving money from the government to get assistance, people getting evicted, people who are getting their houses foreclosed on because they can't make payments. You're talking extreme economic stress that greatly affects a very large majority of Americans who do not make enough money to survive already. and you add the additional economic stress of a pandemic and healthcare, not being affordable. So I think like this was bound to happen in terms of, I honestly, like, if you were to ask me, what was going to happen in 6 months, I was like, if the government does not take care of its people, there's going to be rioting regardless. Like, there's going to be rioting. There's going to be people who are like, why is the government not taking care of us? Why are we getting no assistance from the people who said that they would take care of us? But it all escalated, and it's now on this wave, I think, of the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think it sucks that so many people had to die, of course, to like get to this point where, we're now making legislation like the Breonna law or whatever, which is still fucking ridiculous, that we haven't even arrested the cops who killed her. It's fucking wild. Like, there's a lot of Black Americans who have died as a result of police brutality, and that shit doesn't stick around. Nobody gives a fuck. You know what I mean? Unless we have enough people who are talking about it. And so it started with George Floyd, and unfortunately, like, another person died, and now we're here. And he's not the only person who's died. Like, there's been 5 fucking lynchings. Like, and nobody's investigating these things in different counties. Like, it is infuriating that we have a system in place that is supposed to quote unquote serve and protect, but we have, holy shit, welcome in everybody. We have this quote unquote system that is designed to quote serve and protect, but it has been literally doing nothing as more people are dying for possible racist reasons. Like, no, dude, it is, I cannot stress enough, like, how inherently fucked up the system is. And I know that, like, I don't know how to resolve the issue. I don't know anything about that. All I know in terms of like how I feel about the scenario is that we haven't been taking care of the people who need help. And that's not what America's been doing for years. Especially if you were a person of color, if you are if you are any shade darker than white, you are not being taken care of. And that's just that, dude. It's always been like that. It's been fucking unfortunate.
Yeah, like, I can't really say anything because I don't really know much about America. So
that's okay.
I can't. Like, I feel like...
Well, if you want to ask questions, let me know, and I'll try to answer too, well,
Yeah. I do and I don't. Not on stream, I guess, because it's just... I could be viewed as a racist, for example, for not agreeing with a lot of the things that are happening in that. For example, with the police, like, it appears as if you do have a very big policing problem, but I don't. Like, you can't say it's not a racist problem, because there are definitely racists and there are definitely, like, brutality problems in the police. Like,
right.
I feel as if the police are not being taught how to properly police. Like,
agreed.
The thing that George Floyd was killed by, that should not be happening.
Right.
The fact that you had the 3 other police officers just not intervening, that shouldn't be happening either.
Correct.
But I feel like a lot of what's going on is people whipping other people into a frenzy and massively inflating something that more or less wasn't the issue, that is now, like, being taken over. But in saying that, like, like, people could say, well, that's not a very, conservative thing to say.
Well, I mean, you've already acknowledged that you don't know much, right? So your opinion is formed off of the lack of information, which honestly, like, you coming on the show and talking about this thing shows initiative, shows open-mindedness. And so it shows that you're willing to understand and learn things, right? So, like, I don't want you to really, I know, like, you're trying to be careful about, like, how you're saying this stuff, but I want you to know that, like, when it comes to the channel and the conversation we're having, like, as long as you're being open and honest and willing to learn and understand, like, that's all we need, dude. That's what we need in order to get people to understand what the movement is behind. Like, it's not just a phase. This has been a serious problem, like, in America for a long fucking time. Like, and it wasn't too long ago we had segregated schools and shit. This There are symptoms of racism throughout the United States, and it's not just like the police department is racist, but when it comes down to like, I mean, do you know about like our incarceration rates and stuff?
I know that there are a lot more black people incarcerated than white people in America. That
By
I
a
feel
lot.
I don't feel as if that is a racism thing. I feel as it is a part of it, but there are other things that go into it.
Okay.
But if you bring those up, for example, it's like, well, it's not about race, so we don't care. But
so
again,
those things are about race. So like the reason, like a lot of people bring up the statistics for like black on black violence and that sort of thing. Like it's very easy to point on like, well, they're in lower income communities, so lower income communities are more prone to violence or illegal activity, right? And when it comes down to like what you're talking about, the reason why people default on systemic racism and talk about it in that way is because people who are put into a poor situation, like if let's say without any control, you're born in the ghetto or you're born on the south side of Chicago. Okay, I'm in Illinois, so Chicago's the city here. In the south side of Chicago, if you're born there, the likelihood of you being able to get out and be successful as an individual is damn near fucking impossible. You are more likely to be arrested or die as a result of the necessity of what you need to do in order to survive, because you cannot get a job to provide for yourself, a family, have the proper health insurance, or a big one, be educated enough to know your scenario and what you need to do to be successful. Those tools are not accessible to you. And as somebody who like, you can sympathize with people having trouble with school. Imagine going to a school that doesn't have the proper funding or the proper education tools or ways to draw students in, or have good teachers because they're not getting paid well because of a result of the poor income that they're getting from the property taxes in the surrounding area. So it's like, there's a lot of like, these riots are the end result of a long history of people getting literally beaten down or put in prison. And you can look this up too, so if you want to check out anything, I think the best place, honestly, and this is where I started, is the war on drugs. The war on drugs, like the term marijuana is used specifically to target blacks and Latino Americans. Like that, the amount of people that are in prison for non-violent drug charges is insurmountable, man. It's fucking wild. We have a we have a. I don't know if you.
That's so fucking insanely stupid.
It's fucking wild, dude. And the fact that it's not federally legal speaks volumes as to like what kind of quote unquote chaos is supposed to be happening. We're also talking about voter suppression. If you go to prison, you don't have the right to vote in a lot of states, which means that you don't have the ability to pass. And this doesn't matter if like your state passed legislation, like they'd have to make specific legislation in your state for after you get out of prison for nonviolent drug charges so that you could vote again. We have a system that doesn't rehabilitate. We literally keep fucking people up on purpose. It's literally, yes, exactly like Drinky Bear says. Private prisons are a way of slave labor. Private prisons, when I say that word, what that means is that a private prison is used to profit, literally. They pay the state based on a guaranteed incarceration rate, which means they incentivize people to get arrested and put laws in place that fuck people up for their entire life, so that the state and the people involved can benefit from them off of their body monetarily. It's really fucked up, man. Like this is a multifaceted thing. It's not just one person dying and people blowing it out of proportion. You're talking about, again, like years of this shit going on, and now there's the momentum to get behind it. So that's why, like, when I don't like to use the word taking advantage, but when it comes down to this whole situation that we're in, the wave that needed to happen, the momentum that needed to happen is happening right now, and that's why it's still going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. In a way, the ends justify the means of,
right.
Hey, here's an opportunity that we can like put this on blast and everyone can hear it.
Right, because when it comes down to this, man, like what our government wants and what people want that are in power that are profiting off of this stuff, especially like private prisons and dude, there's a prison guard union, there's the police union. pay for politicians to put certain policies in place so they can benefit. All of this comes down to money, is really what it comes down to. How can I get rich off of somebody without without endangering myself, or what's the best way so that I can create an unsustainable thing for another person's life and just make money straight off of it as best as I can. It's capitalism, but at the expense of the American. That's how I understand it. And it's I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, I've had the privilege to just sort of understand this shit, but I didn't really understand the momentum behind it and the trauma that exists generationally, like, for an entire human being. You know what I mean? Like, it really bothers me that anybody who's a different shade than me, if they're black, Latino, Native American, like, they are seen lesser than in some eyes. And when it comes down to, like, how our lower income communities are, like, it's literally just punching down. You're designed to stay in that bracket, and it's really hard for you to get out. And the reason why that's the case is because there's a profit that can be made off of that, which is really fucked up. But because we have when I think it was FDR, I can't remember which president, talked about the prison industrial complex. The military and the prison industrial complex are two of our biggest money makers in the United States. So much so that it controls policy and how people get elected, who stays in power. It's absolutely mind-blowing that we have a system in place that, like, allows this to happen. And at the same time, like, for example, the police. So you're talking about those 4 other officers who watched their comrade literally kill somebody on the street, right? They didn't do anything. Now, there could be arguments about, like, well, if they did do something, it's a problem with, like, the precinct, right? So they can solve this problem. There have been so many stories, so many issues that have come up across police departments all over the United States that have literal no accountability. So when these scenarios happen, what happens is they get suspended or they get fired from their department, and then they go to a different precinct. And for I know that there's been multiple articles following, like, a rap sheet from one police officer who like committed murder, like 2 or 3 different precincts, and was still working in a different police precinct in a different state, because the rap sheets that those guys had and what they did at those police precincts weren't following every officer. So you have officers that have a history of violence that aren't being tracked because they get a new job and they're being looked out for. And also, when it comes down to the scenarios where you report somebody, there have been a lot of people who have been fired or suspended indefinitely from the police force by reporting their comrade for misconduct. So there's no reward system in place, or training, like opportunity to provide training for anybody who needs help. And I don't want to negate police officers as well, because when it comes down to being a police officer, that's got to be the most stressful job I could fucking imagine. You don't know what you're going into every day. So the fact that you have I think it's 8 weeks, Drinky Bear. I don't know if it's 6 months. I think it's like 8 weeks and you get a gun. 6 months of total, like, recruitment training, but I could be wrong. Please take my shit with a grain of salt. I don't know enough about this. This is just like this is just me recounting things that I kind of recall. But the big issue, another big issue too, when we're talking about, like, trauma, killing somebody with your gun, or being in a firefight, or any sort of, like, confrontation as a police officer, because we don't have a healthcare system in place that allows people to properly process their trauma or the shit that they've been through. They literally go through this experience and then they're tossed back onto the street to work in an environment that's stressful. They probably get 2 weeks off of work paid, right? And then they're still living with that trauma of, like, shooting that person or them being shot at. You know what I mean? And having to do with it. It's fucking wild. Yeah. I know that was a lot. I'm sorry. I'm just, like,
no,
on a roll. Has any of this, like, is this stuff that you've heard before or anything like that? Or is this, like, new information?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conflicting points about things, though.
Okay.
Not enough to go off the top of my head, but you address this massive raid that's happened.
Oh, sure. Hey, Andy. We're getting in the heat of it. We're talking about, like, the Black Lives Matter movement and all that. Welcome in, everybody. Hello.
To an Australian.
Say again?
2 an Australian.
2 an Australian, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Here, I'll play the intro for you guys. Welcome in, everybody. We're having a conversation while we're playing games. I'm playing Rogue Legacy. And this is what we do here. I take phone calls while we're playing games and we talk about topics and stuff. And I just got off of like a long fucking rant, dude. So I'm gonna give him some time to talk here. Rhyddar, thanks for your patience, dude. I'm sorry, man.
Nah, dude, it's fine. It's fine.
Do you want to have some any sort of back and forth, like anything that you want to like go over?
I mean, I wouldn't go saying that the whole police are thinking like capitalists, for example. We don't have that in Australia for sure.
Yeah, you don't.
We do have incidents where like it's like, yeah, that could be seen as racism or that, but we don't have this massive prison industrial conflict like complex happening. So I can't really like say, yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't happen in our country, so why is that happening in yours, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There are things where it's like a lot of black families. I could be wrong on this one. I still want to do research on it. That a lot of black families don't have 2 parents, and that a lot of people just don't give enough of a fuck about their children to raise them correctly, to have like that kind of sturdy family.
Sure.
To teach them morals. And I guess this is really why I want to go into education more as like a major, is to try to prepare children for the most that they can for like tertiary education, or
Sure.
mainly in tertiary education for the rest of their life, to be that kind of like critical thinking and like, hey, this is what the news is telling me. What do they benefit from saying this? And like when somebody makes a report or they have a debate on things, like why are they saying these things? Like kind of thing. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword when I want to do this research to say like these things, like what's the agenda behind this, and so it's very hard to talk about things that are happening in America without like being there and witnessing it firsthand,
right,
and going off by second people's accounts.
Right. Now, just to address like what you just said too. So like when you're talking about like black families and the lack of like parents being there to raise them, a lot of that, like you could argue, so I mean we come from immigrant families, right?
Yeah, my dad's side's full immigrants.
Yeah. So when it comes down to like the family culture and all that, a lot of if you were to tell me right now that 2 people got married, like they moved from Greece to America and they had 9 kids, my first response is that's irresponsible. Like that's not okay. And a majority of the reason why like people were able to do that back then is because there was a lot of prosperity in America, so that people who did have kids, they could have them and they could have very little stress when it comes down to economically. I would say that like when it comes down to keeping families together and having kids, like when you're not planning to, that's an education problem. So you're talking about like a symptom of not being taught properly. And I don't know if you remember sex ed in school, but I went to a mostly white high school, and they barely told me how my fucking dick worked. So I don't expect like a low income school to like actually tell people how to properly educate themselves about like what is safe to do in sex and like what all of this actually means. I think that's like one of the biggest issues that has to deal with like this classism that starts to appear like between poor and it's to me like color is a huge factor in this, but a lot of it, like the reason why I think that like ghettos and stuff exist is because of racism for sure. I think that was like a huge thing for it, but I think the main issue, like racism is a part of it, but a lot of it is just like there is literally no support structure for anybody who lives in a poor neighborhood. Nothing. Like there's no there's no education system that allows them to be prosperous. Like, and I know you're passionate about education, but like you're talking about income, you're talking about an income equality gap that has been for a long time not been addressed in any way, shape, or form. It's just been band-aided. I don't know what the, you know, how to improve that. I don't know, like, you know, what sort of, I don't know what sort of thing could be put in place. All I know is that if you were to properly like fund areas and take care of people that are in lower income communities, like essentially the rule that I would call it, I guess, is like you're only as strong as your weakest link. And right now our weakest link is poor communities, and not strengthening that is causing a whole slew of symptomatic issues, and a lot of it is centered on racism because of these areas that exist because of that. So what I would encourage you to do, I guess, like when it comes down to this stuff, is if you want to know more about it, I would say, like, I don't know, there's a lot of really good research out there. I can't tell you, I'm not like a main dude for research. This is just from podcasts and conversations. But if you want to know more about it, I know for in terms of like learning, I'm an audio learner, so I listen to a lot of audio books and podcasts. My recommendation for reading or getting into it, the new Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, the 10th anniversary edition, is fucking amazing. I'm going through that right now. And then oh my gosh, what was I had one more. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Hey, help me out, guys. He did an interview with Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper interview with
powerful blow quiet. It's goodness video.
The Professor, yes. Oh my god. Cornell West, Dr. Cornell West. Yes, Dr. Cornell West. He's got a phenomenal book. Dr. Cornell West has a book called, and he reads it too. It's fucking awesome. Race Matters, the 25th anniversary edition. And you could totally get through these books in 30 days if you're listening to them every day. That's what I would recommend, dude.
A lot of my audio art learning is from audio.
Same.
If it's like not graphic stuff, then that's pretty much just watching a video.
Yep. Yeah. Dr. Cornell West is a very well-spoken dude. The length of the book is super short too. It's 4 hours and 51 minutes. You're talking about knocking that out in a single day, or I did it like driving back and forth to work, and I listened to it more than once. Absolutely phenomenal. Those two books, I think, like will help you understand a lot more about the situation and kind of like factor in the why as to what's happening in America with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's fascinating stuff, dude.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid too. Now that you're part of the Discord too, like the XP discussion channel, like you have access to that too. People post links and videos, and it's a no judgment like zone unless like somebody's being like super, you know, straightforward racist or something like that. Like you basically post a link. You basically post a link and you're like, hey, I saw this was interesting to me, this is how it makes me feel. And then we've got like a whole rules of engagement. So like there's a pinned tweet about like, you know, these are the things that you should be looking at like prior to posting, so that you understand, you know, what it's like how you know how like before you started speaking, you were setting expectations for like, listen, I don't really know much about this stuff, I just feel this way. That's exactly what that is. It's a framework for you to like work in.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to say something and then like be like, oh, well, you know, things are like this. Like, how do you not know that? Or like, you know, these takes are wrong because of X, and it's like, well, I don't know these things, so.
Right. Yeah, that's not how we set up the Discord, like, at all. Like, if you want to go through too, because you have access now, there's an entire that XP discussion. If you just scroll through, you'll see how conversation is handled, man. It's a very like open-minded sort of thing. We're simply looking to share ideas and provide experience points essentially into the avenues of your life where you're lacking, because that's really what it ultimately is. Like, I could say that, you know, when I was younger, and not even that young, like when I was like 24, 25, 26, 4 years ago, I wasn't really like on pulse or understood what was going on. When it comes down to like racial matters or whatever, it was just like something that I never really, I had the privilege of not knowing. And I mean, you could argue the same thing. Like, it's just not something that has been present in our lives or something that we quote unquote needed to pay attention to. But it's very important for you as an individual, especially somebody who's going to get into education, for you to understand like the different perspectives of people who are black, people of color, like all of that. It's super important so that you can be well-rounded in how you approach scenarios and talk with children, especially about like, you know, how they handle learning and all of that. It's going to be a great aid for you, man. I know like when it comes down to conversation, it's been primarily me talking, and I feel like I'm talking at you, and I feel real bad for that, because this should be a conversation where we go back and forth.
Yeah, I just feel you're really confident about like, well, I mean, you're confident and you're really really passionate about these things, so it's like, you know, and kind of when you're letting someone like who doesn't know anything about it to, you're like, well, here's the things that I know, and you know, like you really want to like cram it all in there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the big thing for me, I guess, that can be like a blanket statement of how I feel about these things, is that a lot of people are putting it down to racism when it's not racism. Like, racism plays a big part, or well, it is that people, my words, people are making racism the biggest thing about what's going on. Where when it's actually other things, it's just people aren't looking deep enough into these things. Well, like, this is a massive thing,
right?
And that people are just slapping this massive racism sticker on it and just being like, "Yep, that's it." It's like,
while I would say, I don't want to just straight up tell you you're wrong, but what I will say is that you definitely lack the experience and perspective that would make you understand why people are saying that it stems from racism. Because what we're talking about, and I touched on a lot of stuff, but when it comes down to what started all of this and what got the momentum to where we're at, it is racism. That is the start of it. You're talking about taking advantage of people and creating a system that doesn't benefit anybody that is a different color. That's racism. So I know it's like, it's hard to see it for what that is, because like there's all this other shit happening on top of it, and you want to, I think like when it comes down to these scenarios, in every scenario where it would be like a white person thing, I don't think, because we don't experience racism, we don't see it for what it is. But when you start educating yourself around like the way especially the United States, it has developed the war on drugs, which is targeted Latinos and Black Americans, the crack epidemic in the 90s, the fucking prison industrial complex, the experiments that were done on poor communities. Like, there is so much information that I think you just don't have or had access to, that is allowing you to draw this conclusion. So while you may feel that it is not racism, it is. And I know I'm saying this confidently, like I know, because I feel like I do, but I will argue, you know, if you wanted to like go over that and we have another conversation, I would love to hear back from you, especially after you've like went on the journey of like looking at the war on drugs. I would say that's probably the best place to start, in all honesty.
Yeah,
it's absolutely fucking nuts, dude. Like, I mean, racism is a huge part in the reason why all of this stuff is.
Yeah, it's like a massive can of worms, to be honest. Like, we have the whole Aboriginal Australian thing, which is a bit different. Like, we tried to pretty much commit genocide on them.
Yeah.
So it's not like America, I guess, but it's something kind of where we see the racism.
Yeah. Well, I would say
Also
that is
with
racism, because you're looking at
it definitely is, but it's like we have a dark history of it, but we're sort of taught about it, but that's kind of the only thing of it. Because we're also a massive immigrant country, like people immigrate to Australia because it's so great, kind of thing. You have a lot of racism mixed in with that, but it's not systemic, I guess.
Like it could be. I mean, we don't like, you admitted yourself, you know, like you're not entirely sure, right? I think like when you're talking about systemic, like if we break apart what systemic is, right? Systemic is a infectious, I would consider it like a virus, right? It is something that is present at every level of the system. That makes it systemic, in my opinion. Like if you're talking about the decision on whether or not this person goes to jail is based on the color of their skin. If this man, let's say, if I told you a woman strangled a toddler, you'd expect her to go to prison for life, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay,
like, it
so
wouldn't depend on race or anything there.
Right. So that's because when it comes down to your judgment, that makes sense, right? She strangled a toddler. Well, what if I told you that woman in the same state as another man who fucking robbed a store and didn't kill anybody and got away with $9, was put in prison for like, I don't know, let's say 10 years. And she got probation. What do you say about that? The difference is
different crimes, but like that's not very right.
Agreed.
Like that's the thing. Like I would have to look into so many other things. Like what are these states' laws? Like what happens?
It doesn't. That's the thing though. So that's what you're talking about.
Me.
So like
that's just me. Like I've got to know more. I don't want to make a decision and be like, oh well, okay. Well, that's not
so
fair.
let's both agree. Let's both agree that when it comes down to that decision, as a human being, not a judge, and you had that decision, you would definitely put that woman away, probably for life, right? The law doesn't mean that it's necessarily right, but that's right, Drinky Bear. But when it comes down to that specific scenario, you're talking about a school teacher, and if you want the articles, we can post them in the XP discussion channel. The variables, like what you're talking about, that thought process, like, and I was caught up in this too. So like my thought process as somebody who used to think and still has to battle like the racist part of my brain that sees somebody who's being handled by the police like George Floyd, and my question isn't, my immediate reaction is, that's fucked up, they should not be doing that, and it's what did he do? Right?
Yeah.
That's like your initial reaction.
And I was like, why is the police fucking like doing that kind of thing? Like that you shouldn't be doing that.
Right. You shouldn't be doing that. But that question of like, what did he do to deserve that? That comes from a place of not having encountered or had any issue with the police your entire life. There are so many people that like, when we talk about generational trauma, like the problems with police, like this goes back hundreds of years, dude. So what I don't want to keep going back over and over on this, because like it's easy to get stuck on a loop, because right now we're at like a plateau of like, you don't know enough, so you're uncertain about what you should say, and I'm saying things very confidently, so it's like it's a really weird space.
It's more like, I don't know what happened beforehand for this to happen. Like, what happened for the thing to escalate in this situation?
Right, but
So
you shouldn't
it's
have
like,
to ask that question.
Well, my first thing is like, hey, you shouldn't be like strangling this guy with your foot.
Right.
You should have him in a like handcuffed in a position where he cannot like hurt anyone. Like he's restrained. Okay, that's it. Like
Right.
your job's done. But you need to kind of know what happened beforehand to see like the end, like the like how the ends justify the means kind of thing. But as a police, it's a bit different because you can see he's restrained. There's no need to do that.
Right.
But
and regardless, the death isn't justified.
The death is definitely unjustified.
Yeah.
But when you so like from again, like I don't see a lot of what's happening with like judges from different states because generally our states have the same laws.
Right.
We have like 7 states in Australia. I could be wrong on that one. Ugh.
Right. But you'd expect consistency is what you'd expect, right?
Yeah, consistency, and where the law, if it's murky, it needs to be like generally you'll have like judges and people who are in law to then change the law or to make a new law to accommodate for what's happened.
Sure.
Because sometimes if it falls in within a law and it's like this isn't right, then it's either amended or changed, and
right.
And
well, I mean, like the argument for that, the argument against that is like in America there is no consistency. You will definitely, if you are black or a person of color, you will be tried at a much harsher rate than what you would by your white counterparts. And there are so many instances of that. That example I gave you is a real example. Like that's a real scenario.
I can definitely get behind like having more consistent laws and the fact of your race not being something determined by it.
Right.
But I have to know that the laws were because it's the whole idea of justice. Like everyone is seen as the same. You're only like
but they're not though.
Yeah,
that's how it should be in an ideal scenario, but that's not how it is. And that's why people are rioting, dude. Because people are being constantly murdered and falsely imprisoned for the color of their skin, dude. They're seen lesser than. They are literally treated like animals because of the color of their skin. That's why people are rioting. It's not just like this one dude. So we're coming back to the same point. I'm not looking to keep redoing the conversation. Like when it comes down to it, my position is that the system that we have is inherently more prone to imprisoning black people, which is in itself racism, black people and people of color. And in terms of how to fix it, I don't know how to do that. I'm not entirely sure how we would go about doing that. But I know that when it comes down to like what's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protesting, like this is an absolute necessary moment in our country's time because at no other time were we able to share the information that we have. We weren't able to highly publicize from like the protesters' point of view, which have been mostly peaceful. I agree the initial protests and looting, like that was an issue, but from what I understand, none of that stuff is happening on a regular basis now. It is primarily the police attacking peaceful protesters. And I would encourage you to, again, like revisit those books. I'll post them in the XP discussion channel too, or DM them to you if you prefer. I'd love to have this conversation again.
Yeah, it's like I can agree with things. It's like I don't agree with rioting in general in the sense that you're destroying a lot of things that don't have any fucking like correlation to racism. Like people's private property are getting destroyed, businesses,
right,
and that just makes the community like suffer even more.
I would agree to a certain extent though.
Yeah,
when it comes down to it, like I don't know how to explain it, but I don't agree
with it at all. There's no reason to do this. Like, it's like,
well, the reason to do it would be if you're let's say like your neighborhood or the people that you're trying to protect were getting killed on a regular basis. Oh, sorry, flight attendant. Hold on. So, I mean, I know, like, again, this is something that, like, is so far outside of, like, your perspective that you can't comprehend it. But I promise you, if you educate yourself, like, around these things and the reasons why and the long history of what's going on, like, you're talking about people who are angry and upset. And we just talked about, like, how you and me personally, like, dealing with emotional, like, handling our own emotional aspects of our life, and how, like, we've had to go to therapy or, like, talk to people about, like, the way we feel so that we can process our emotions, or in some cases we don't process them, right? And you're talking about generations of people who have been disenfranchised and have not had the ability nor the education or been given the opportunity, simply because of, you know, where they live, what color their skin, the color of their skin. And so how do you handle a situation you don't know how to handle? There's multiple ways. Destruction is one of them. I mean, you may not agree with it, but, like, when it comes down to it, man, that's the outlet that they have to do.
Yeah.
And you don't have to agree with it. I don't think it's the conversation isn't about whether or not you agree with what they're doing is wrong. It's most about, like, what needs to be done to make it right for the people who feel like they've been so hurt and disenfranchised that they need to do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like when you do these things, like pulling down the statue of, I think it's Sir Robert Peel, and writing ACAB and putting, like, a fucking hammer and sickle on it,
Sure.
it kind of just makes you look like a fucking, I'm not gonna say it. I was gonna say it. I was like,
Looks like a fucking idiot.
it's just
sure.
because this guy founded the 9 principles of policing, which are like the golden rules kind of thing. And, like, protesters are just doing this dumb stuff. It's like, why?
Yeah,
why
but
are you defacing these statues?
But again, but when it comes down to this, like, you're talking about a system of oppression. Anything representing the police is fucking
this is in the UK. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but there's racism in the UK. Why do I say racism? Like, there is racism in the UK.
The US. It's
bad.
It's so much different in the UK than it is the US.
Maybe it's less violent. I don't know about that, but, like, when it comes down to how black people are treated, racism is definitely part of the whole. There's a lot of issues with that, man. I mean, you're in Australia, so I don't know how much you know about the UK. I've only been seeing videos after videos after videos of people, like, who've been, like, I saw a black couple who got out of their car and was going to their house, and a police officer asked them, like, where they lived, and simply followed them to their house. Like, they were in their driveway being questioned whether or not they live here. They backed into the parking space. They did everything. And the only reason why they would have been stopped is because they looked suspicious, is what they said. But they were just black. It was a black family. That's all it was.
I can't say that, like, you know, that there's no racism in it. It's not every, like, black couple that are getting pulled down. It could have been an isolated incident, for example.
Sure.
But because you're seeing these things. But to say that, like, the UK has just as much racism, or to insinuate that the UK and the US have the same racism problems, that they don't.
But,
like,
I mean, what are your facts for that? Because I don't have any. I can only listen to the people who are, like, talking about it, and all the people that are talking about it are black people. They're sharing their experiences.
I don't want to talk about it because I don't have concrete points. I wanted to do, like,
well, can I ask you this? Can I ask you this? So, like, when it comes down to facts and all that, like, it's one thing to be facts, and it's one thing to share your experience as a human being. If you have people of a different color who are sharing their experiences with the police, are you going to listen to them? Like, are you inclined to believe, like, yes, I have had problems with the police?
Well,
yes.
Yeah, like, okay. I'm not going to discount because, like, you know, like, I want to know more about it.
Right. So my advice, like, and I need to do this too, obviously, and I'm still doing it every day. It's just a matter of, like, looking out for those videos and watching them and asking questions and being brave about it. It's hard, like, but, like, you have to do it. You have to expose yourself to these things because, I mean, Rhyddar, we have the privilege of not having to deal with this shit ever in our life, dude. It's in our faces now because This is something that's been going on for a long time, and now people are coming out and talking about it because, again, this wave is happening. We have to do it. We have to, in order for us to progress as human beings and become better, we have to listen to our fellow human beings. There's no other way around it. And you have to trust their experiences.
It's not that I'm not listening. It's just I'm being critical of what I'm hearing. Like, I want to know more.
Okay, then you need to do that.
Yeah, like, that's what I want to do before I started talking about this. Before I come off as, like, somebody that just wants to, like, you know, challenge what's being said because he doesn't really understand what's going on.
You fully admitted that you don't understand what's going on and you don't have all the information. So that's it, dude. That's enough. Like, it's not, I'm not trying to attack you or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you can feel this way, but you acknowledge that the reason why you feel this way is because of a lack of experience and information, correct?
Yeah, I can say that, but I just, from what I've initially heard and stuff, it's like, I just, boy, it's more, I want to kind of find out more about, these problems, about what's happening, and be able to say, like, no, it's not just racism, because you can't say that things are inherently being racist when, like, you have no real proof of it. There could be something happening beforehand, or there could be more underlying problems. But I'm more than willing to, like, accept that, you know, racist things happen, and, like, I guess the main thing is just not to look at everything as being 100% completely racism until you can 100% say there is, you know?
Right.
Like, to not just look at it like, yeah, racism, when there's, like, there are things that happened beforehand, or there are other problems, which is this, it's not racism here, or it's not just racism.
Okay. I mean, so what you're saying too is, like, it sounds like you're trying to come up with a scenario to, like, understand it, and I understand what you're doing, like, in terms of, like, you know, trying to explain it, I guess. But I don't know how to explain this easily, but I guess what I would give you as an anecdote is that when it comes down to, like, when people say racist, like, when they chalk it up to racism as you're describing, like, again, this is, like, more of a looped conversation. So I'll say it one more. I'm just gonna say it one more time because I feel like it's not being absorbed. Like, the reason why that people default, it's not a default response to say that that's racist or whatever. It's not a false flag. It's not a sheep in wolf's clothing. Like, racism is just a part of our world. And when it comes down to, like, what we have to do as people, it's not enough to just be like, well, I guess racism things happen. We have to be anti-racist. If we see somebody who's thinking, and I think people take this to the extreme, and this is where, like, you and me can be, I think this is a common ground. It's like, there shouldn't just be like it shouldn't just be like, you know, blanket coat, like, you said this, you're fucking racist. Like, you get automatically labeled. I think, like, when it comes down to it, and what this whole situation is going to do for a lot of people is it's going to make them reassess the way they think. And that's probably the biggest thing about it. Is, like, how do I think about people of color? What is the scenario that I'm, like, thinking in? Like, for example, you know, my thought process that I just explained, like, when I was watching the George Floyd video, before I even got to the end, my initial thought process was, what did he do to do that? Which is inherently, I'm going to say it, it's racist. That's a racist thing to think. Because when it comes down to that scenario and what's happening, it's not about what he did. It's about what's happening right then and there. It's not just like...
Yeah. Do
you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I don't... Racism is not something I see, like, immediately, like, oh, okay, well, there's a white guy and a black guy. Racism kind of thing. Like,
well, can I ask you really quick, what are you white?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's why. Like, not to be an asshole, but, like, that's what it is. We literally, dude, we have the least experience when it comes down to, like, what racism is. And for the most part, for us as white people, like, it's just been something that's been a part of our lives. So seeing it is, in seeing it, is the extreme case, right? Is that video of a man getting murdered by the police with his, neck on, with his knee on his neck. That's
see, that's another thing though. Like, just because you're white doesn't mean that you're not gonna. Because
can I ask you this? Did you have any racism classes? Did your parents ever talk to you about racism?
Well, my parents didn't, but we had classes about like racism, for example.
Okay. So how long was that class, and when did you have it?
I mean, it was back in school. Like,
high school.
I don't remember.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was in high school, but yeah, I don't remember.
That's what I'm talking about. But, like, we have so the difference between that and what a person of color experiences. Like, I mean, dude, there's just I watched a video today of a kid playing basketball in his driveway, and you see in the camera, like on the front of the house. And this isn't just like saying this is racism. I'm just saying that experiencing racism is a regular thing for people that are black or people of color. This kid's playing basketball, super harmless. He's got to be like 8 years old, and there's a police officer driving down the street. He stops playing basketball and he gets behind his dad's car so that his like that police officer, as he's driving by, has no idea that kid's in the driveway. That's the kind of fear that people live with that are black, that are people of color. Like, they have to actively be proactive about avoiding the police because they may die. Like, that's what they're being taught. That's what they see on TV. That's like literally every news station about like somebody getting arrested. It's fucked up, dude. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's definitely fucked up, and I can agree with you there.
And that's what we call. I mean, that's what they call generational trauma, right? And that's something that exists. So what I'm saying is that, again, like, I'm going to keep repeating myself. It's part of racism, Gray. It's part of racism. It's fear as a result of racism. Does that make sense? So, like, when people chalk it up to racism, it's not chalking it up. There is symptoms of what racism causes. And so in the end, when it comes down to combating that, that's what we're talking about. So, like, you can pick apart and try to choose, and I'm not saying you do this, but like the way you've been talking about it, it sounds like you are trying to find the logical reason why these things are happening. And when it comes down to like multifaceted issues, a lot of this, in my opinion, comes down to the fundamentals of how that situation occurred. And when it comes down to like the fundamentals of how things happen, in my opinion, it always comes down to really basic, really simple shit. And was that whole scenario that played out racist? I don't know. I can't tell you that as a person who is really, just getting into the shit. But in my opinion, it was based on race. Like, the reason why George Floyd was handled in that fashion and why he was pinned on the ground the way he was because he was black. I don't know any other reason for that. There's so many stories about this stuff, so much that it's hard to not look at that and not understand. Like, dude, if a kid is in a park and he gets shot by the police because he's playing with a toy, like, I don't even know if he had a toy gun on him. That's fucked up, dude. Right? We can both agree on that. Why is that happening? Well, there's again, multifaceted issue, but when it comes down to it, it's because of racism. That's like the main ingredient to the concoction. That's the chemical X to all this shit.
With the gun thing, though, like, that's kind of something that, well, I mean, especially in America, I'd imagine you would be like, if you don't have an orange cap on your gun, you do not bring it out with you.
It's not even that. You can't even have that unless you want to die. If you're a person of color. Yeah, like you could. Here's the another fucking thing too. I
really want to go back to one of the points before.
Oh sure, yeah.
Because there are things like, apparently George Floyd did have a massive rap sheet beforehand, so there might have been things to happen before that event. But again, it doesn't justify it. But
that's not something also to bring up. That doesn't matter. He died.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah. There's no reason to bring it up. That's like a default, like that's been a default thing that people have brought up. Oh, he's not a martyr. He's not a person you should be rioting over. It's like, you don't understand. It's not about him. You guys just like chose the person to kill that day. Like, that's what happened. Like, it could have been anybody, and those same results would have happened, man.
True. Like, I'm not saying that, that apparently because of like X thing, there's a reason to do it.
Right.
It's again to try to understand what's happening behind the scenes.
Right. So, and what I'm saying is like, and I've acknowledged this too, but I need you to understand that thought process that you have, that thought process is inherently racist. You may not feel that way right now, but when it comes down to it, when you see a man on his neck and you think about his rap sheet and you're like, well, I mean, he had a bad history. We don't know what happened before, but like that's a racist way to think about it, because
that's not what I meant though. Like,
that's what you said.
Yeah, but that's not what I meant.
Okay, so like, what did you mean? I'm not trying to grill you again. Like, these are the mental loops that like I myself struggled with. I didn't even get to recognize it. It was just like, well, that's a part of it. Like, him having a rap sheet was probably why he was roughly handled. Like, that has nothing to do with there's no reason for him to die because of that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, because I can't default to it saying that it's racism. Like, I don't know what happened beforehand to say that. Like, to see what happened.
But you don't need to. That's what I'm telling you.
No,
that's why like when I say the hard part about this is like, this is really hard, okay, to like really wrap your brain around. And I know that this is, I'm not trying to accuse you. Okay. So this is the hardest part. This is the hardest part, guys. Okay. So the hardest part about all of this stuff is to be okay with the fact that you thought that way. And when somebody says that's racist, does that mean you're racist? What does that mean? Do you take it as that? Like, when I ask these questions, are you taking it as like, well, is he calling me racist? And is there a reason?
I mean, the last part, it was like, it kind of sounded like you were calling me racist, and it was like, what?
So
I try to look at things before seeing that it's racist, Like, I try to understand what's going on, and then if I can see that it's racist, then yeah, for sure, 100%.
Okay. So you can recognize, like,
I can recognize people being racist because they are racist, or like things happening because of racism.
Okay, so let me give you this too, because this is something that you'll also like need to learn as well. Just because something is racist doesn't mean that your default setting is being a racist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, true.
Okay, so like, you can have racist behaviors without being like, fuck those people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so as a white person that you've been your entire life, you have an unconscious bias, or in which case, more of like a racist bias based on your upbringing and how you saw the world as a white person. That's what I'm trying to get at. Now, when it comes down to like, am I racist? Like, that's a question that you have to ask yourself and assess the way you think about things. I don't believe you are. You're willing to come into this conversation and talk about this stuff, and it's very difficult, like, to unpack this shit. I know it is, because for me, again, this had taken like, and I'm still unpacking this shit. Like, I have to catch myself for stupid bullshit like that. You can have racist behaviors, but not be like, fuck those people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. The behavior you're exhibiting is racist. That's the difference. So you yourself may not be actively racist. You're not going to protect a Christopher Columbus statue and try to beat up people who are different color than you, right? That's not going to happen. That's what you think of when you think of racism, right? The extreme example, but you need to understand that racism could be a spectrum of existence. It doesn't need to be black and white. That was a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I see as racist is people acting in a different way because of like one's race,
right,
for example. Like,
right. And so you may not mean to like, you may not mean to do that, but those are the behaviors that a lot of people who are white exhibit, like the way they think about the scenario, the whole like, oh, I think about things logically, so I must have an excuse for the reason for him getting in trouble, you know, like, and being held the way he is. Like those are unconscious bias that are inherently racist, because you're already thinking about, you know, what did that person do prior to, oh, okay, well, he died, you know, like the scenario. And I think you and me both agree, because we both have said we agree, you have yourself agreed that he didn't deserve to die, right? So the other shit doesn't matter. That default setting is something that you have to work on. And I don't know if this is your first conversation talking about this, but like that's the hardest part, man. Is like, this is a complex scenario. You may not know your own biases and how you handle things. And that's what these conversations are for. This is the reason why I had these conversations, is because it allows us to unpack these ideas and understand, like, you know, like you said, when you say logically, when you approach things in a logical manner, what I said to you makes sense, right?
yeah, I mean, the majority of the conversation's true, but the part where I'm like not automatically wanting to chalk things down as racism, or I guess it's like,
hard, dude.
It's a lot to unpack, but
I know.
it's like it's hard to frame without saying that, you know, that I'm a racist. But it's just,
I'm not saying you're racist. I'm saying that when it comes down to the thought process and like how you think about things, that even though you don't,
racist.
it can be. That's what I'm saying, is like, you really need to be careful about that. Like, really think about the reasons why you're defaulting to like, well, what did he do?
Well, yeah, but
And is the assumption that he did something wrong based on the color of his skin?
It could be. Like,
so that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, that unconscious bias, you know?
Yeah, I just, I'm a loss for words trying to understand and to say things.
It's okay.
Like, it's kind of gone through. It's like, I'm not saying that this person did this, like, X person because he was thingo as not being racist.
Sure.
100% understand that's a thing. Or people acting in a different way because of someone's race, for example, or someone being something. But to say, for me to see things like in specifically for the police, is to see what warranted the situation.
Sure.
Like, why are the police there? Why is what is happening? To not immediately go, oh, there's a black person? Oh, okay, well, racist. Well, no, something is happening here. But it could be, you know? I'm not saying that it can't be this, or I'm not ruling it out, but...
I understand, dude. I'm just saying you should question the whole scenario, like, start from the beginning. Because it's like, if you see this video, most people's default question is, you know, like, what did this person do? And is that assumption, like, based off of the police being there? Or is this based off of the color of their skin?
The police. It hasn't got anything to do with the thing.
It doesn't have anything to do with the race.
The race, no. Like, it was over, like, the George Floyd thing. Because this is the video we're talking about, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's an overreaction of what's happening. Like, in no situation should you be putting someone in a stranglehold like that with your knee on their neck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. Yeah, like, it's. Like, what I can be saying is seeing is racist to not understand that that was a racist thing. The the reason for what was happening and stuff. Because I question, why does this response of what's happening, like, what happened for this to happen, kind of thing.
Right.
I'm trying to say it without it's really hard for me to say this because I don't know how I can articulate my thing without it seeing as racist, you know?
Yeah, but
Like,
I mean,
apparently I'm
you
not.
can recognize that if you're in conflict with yourself, that it's probably like, is the worry that it is racist? Is that the worry, or are you worried about being judged?
The worry is me being judged as racist and coming off as being racist without actually meaning to be racist. If you can understand what I'm saying.
I guess so.
Like,
I mean, what I would say
really
is, if you're worried about being racist, then there's probably some racism in there. That's what I'm saying.
Not really, because being labeled as a racist is a career ender.
Oh, it could
You don't
be,
have to
yeah.
be racist to be called racist. Like, you know?
Yeah.
That's the big fear. Like, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's very like good for me to not be called racist when I'm not a racist, you know?
I would agree.
Pretending to
Yeah.
racist.
Well, let's
Like-
do this. Let's rather than delve into waters that are like uncertain and muddy any further, because we keep, again, like, this conversation keeps looping back and forth, like, entirely, due to like either a lack of understanding or experience or whatever. I would encourage you to collect your thoughts and figure out exactly how you'd like to say stuff, and then use the Discord that we have set up to have that conversation. Because, like, when it comes down to like how you feel about this and what information can be presented, like, the only way you're gonna really understand it is if a dialogue is happening, and that's why we've been talking for so long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's gonna
The
take
main
more than
message
just
I
like.
wanna get off-
Say again.
Sorry. The main message I want to get off is that don't look at things as just pure racism. Look at like what happened beforehand and
Right.
like what, you know, like why is
understand,
this
yeah.
happening, kind of thing.
Right. And but when it comes down to it, like, whether you understand it or not, the judgment, like, can't ultimately come from you because you don't understand it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So, like, feeling a certain way about things is great, for sure. And you've done a great job of like setting expectations about how you feel about scenarios, and even clarifying before like expressing yourself feeling wise. Like, before I, express myself, like, I want you guys to know that I don't know really much about what's going on in America and the racism that is in America. But again, like, the more you're going to dive into this stuff, like, dude, just start with the war on drugs. That's probably going to be the biggest thing and easiest thing to get into, to start.
And, yeah,
And
like I
that'll
said,
give you a
I don't know.
huge insight as to what's going on. And
like
I know that,
said, I wasn't ready to dive into this. You know?
yeah, but I think this was a good conversation. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would have liked to read up on some stuff before looking like a bit of an idiot on a talk show, but you know.
Hey, I mean, it's ambiguity.
boy.
I don't think you look like an
Hey.
idiot. I think, like, you stimulated a lot of really good conversation, man.
Yeah, I feel like I may have come off as a bit of a racist, where it's like that's not what I meant.
I don't think so.
I don't like. I'm really angry about these statues, man. Like people tearing them down. It's like you have no right to do this. Like, because it's happening in Australia too, and it's just
Sure. But
why?
you're talking.
Like,
I mean, you're
stop it.
talking again. You're talking about this is where we loop again. But you're talking about people who weren't being listened to, right? And there's definitely opportunists, and there's people who want to just fuck shit up to be fuck shit up. But there's nobody dying as a result of these statues being torn down. Statues can be replaced. You know what I mean? If the statue has like an inherent, like in the United States, if those statues are like from rapists and pillagers and people that were former KKK members and slave traders or whatever, like, fucking take them down, dude. They shouldn't be here. That's not what we're about. We're no longer that America. We need to move past that.
Petition to take them down, though. You know.
Yeah, sure, but what if they're not? You know what I mean? Like, what if they're not going to take them down? Like, I don't know. People express themselves differently, right?
Yeah.
And a statue can be replaced. A statue can be replaced, buildings can be replaced, but human life can't be replaced, man. So like,
it can.
human
but
life
the
cannot be replaced.
Statues have more of a meaning than being an inanimate thing or being.
They can be replaced is the thing. That's what I want to
Yeah,
get
they
across.
can be. They can be, yeah. But
Yeah. You may not respect how people are expressing themselves, but they can be replaced, dude. Like, if this all cools down and those statues go back up and people are cool with it, like, you can chalk it up to, like, nobody really, like, they did this because they wanted to and they wanted to be, you know, destructive in that manner. But when those things come down in here in the United States, like, they're not going to go back up. That we cannot allow that to happen. I don't know, like, you know, what it's like in Australia or the UK, but I know that in the US specifically, you know, those are not going to be back up. We just got to get that shit out of here and literally move past it. Like, those things should not be, we shouldn't have participation trophies for the Civil War. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Like, the people who, those ideas that existed that treated people lesser than, Christopher Columbus, who is just a fucking American-made bullshit story that's fed to us, like, in the U.S. in social studies, is like this, oh, he discovered America bullshit. Like, we need actual history. We need interesting things to be learned about, like, our actual history, not just, we need to know where we came from. And I mean, America was built by slaves and immigrants primarily. Like, that's where America came from our perspective.
We have that in Australia too, where we're taught about Captain Cook, who is pretty much your Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
And that we're taught that
it's a pretty story.
Yeah, and we're taught about, like, you know, how pretty much we're all convicts and, you know, immigrants come to Australia, but I think we have, like, those kind of core tenets, and that really, I guess, kind of uphold the thing. Like, you know, we love, like, different cultures and stuff. Like, we're not inherently racist. Like,
Sure.
we love these things. Like, I can say how much I'm a Welsh Irish person. At the end of the day, I'm an Australian, you know?
Sure.
Like, where we all, like, we give people that fair go. Like, but yeah, like, it's definitely different. Like, I feel as if we should be taught more about the Indigenous Australians and what happened, more than what we already are.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, like, improvements to things, but yeah, it's not as big as a problem as, like I say, as it could be in America.
I mean, you may see that. I mean, you can't compare it. Like, let's just say that.
Yeah.
So it's like comparing
Definitely
trauma.
not.
You know what I mean? Like, if you compare trauma, like, I've got PTSD, you got PTSD. My PTSD comes from my parents yelling at me, but you were literally, like, beat, you know what I mean, as a kid.
Yeah,
so I shouldn't feel as bad. Racism is racism, regardless of where you're at, right? So,
True.
yeah. I mean, we both can agree on that. Dude, it's getting late. It's 12:45. I gotta get to fucking bed. Shit.
It's all good, dude.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is a lovely topic for you.
That's okay, dude.
But yeah, like,
I obviously I'm passionate about it and I enjoy talking about this stuff. So don't fucking worry about it. Honestly, this I felt was a really good conversation. And when it comes down to, like, how this was handled, maybe there was people in chat who needed to hear this shit and you know, benefited from it or needed that extra perspective. I don't know what it is, but I think people ultimately got what they needed out of it. Thank you for being brave and talking about this stuff. I know that, like, you would have liked to be more equipped, but, you know, maybe after some Wikipedia articles or YouTube or whatever, the audiobooks, like, I'd love to hear more from you, dude. It'd be really nice.
yeah, like, I wanted to talk about other things than this, but yeah. Just yeah.
It could be something else. Yeah, I'm down. I either way, again, it was a great conversation, dude.
So good, dude.
All right, man. Have a great night.
I'll try to.
All right, see you, man.
That's it.
Misty, I'm sorry, bud. Oh, it's 12:45. I gotta get out of here. The conversation flew by. I thought it was like 11:30. It's 1 a.m. Doyle rules. Fuck you, Harry. I'm sorry if I missed anybody, like alerts, all that fun stuff. John Lung, thank you for the follow. Madison, thank you for the gifted sub to Yuki. Pivotal Juncture, your generosity's nuts. Drinky Bear, thank you for the $10. Megals, you're a goddamn hunk. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I apologize if I missed you. Or said hello, you know, like we get swept up in conversation, and I try to do this because, like, when it comes down to it, I think we can all agree. 2-hour conversation. Yeah, exactly. We can all agree that we all learned something, I think. And I think that when it comes down to all the stuff that we talked about, the most important thing that you guys can know is that talking about this stuff is how we get better as people. I just, whenever we get swept up in conversation like this, I know I'm going to be tired tomorrow. And we got a stream tomorrow. I know you guys will be tired, but this won't be... Remember, our days where we've been tired and had to go to work, that's not the first time we've done that. And you need to find comfortability in that. Okay? You've done this before. You've been tired at work before. There's confidence in that. You know how to handle that shit. Maybe 2 cups of coffee tomorrow. Okay? Thank you guys so much for your conversations. Pivotal, thank you for sharing your coming out story. Drinky Bear, thank you for sharing your coming out story, and thank you for the lovely conversation. Pivotal, I really enjoyed our convo about like self-love and forgiveness. Maybe we can talk more about that next time. Rhyddar, we could totally talk about something else too. I enjoyed the conversation, so please don't feel bad. Thank you guys. Yeah, we stream on Thursday. Don't even give me the "it's Thursday now." Misty, don't fucking troll me, dog. Shut up, Misty. I knew you were gonna fucking do that shit. Get out. You're banned. You're fucking banned, dude. No, it's Wednesday, Misty. I mean, it's Thursday now because it's fucking 12:49, but it was Wednesday. You're breathtaking. Thank you guys so much. It's too late. I'm not going to look to rate anybody. Thank you for those who participated in the conversation. Yeah, it's the 18th. Now it's Thursday. Fuck you guys. Fuck you guys. Don't get me with the semantics, okay? Thank you so much for hanging out today. Thank you guys for those who called. Again, we're here most of the week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings, trying to dissolve the barrier between myself and chat. Saturday, we've got our charity stream with More Visage. We're raising money for Color of Change, an amazing organization that's helping the Black Lives Matter movement in multiple facets. Thank you guys again so much for being here. I love you. I'll miss you. And I'll see you guys later. Good night, babies. Mwah.